This is Ion Hong Kong with Key.
And this is Harminder, and we'll be discussing the top news for the week involving Hong Kong and China.
Before you making this, have you think about the NCC, NCC as a student, non-Chinese speaking student? Does their parents really want them to go to the China mainland trip or not? Because last year my son has a choice to go to China mainland with his school, which I rejected because I think I don't like it, or I don't like the mainlander and anything. But why in your policy you have mentioned this? Is it you want us to know more about China, but we are not interested? Why you are forcing us to learn more about China and all this mainlander?
So you're saying that you don't want your children to know cities outside of Hong Kong?
We are not interested. You are forcing us to know more about it. We are not interested in your mainland. We are not interested in your China. And we are HongKonger. We are not mainlanders.
Welcome back to the second part, and we just played a clip from Apple Daily, and actually after the policy address, then CY Leung went on the radio show, and then some non-Chinese speaking parents and phone in, and then then that's the interesting part.
You should invite that lady onto the program. She was very eloquent. I'm a Hong Kong person, not a mainlander. Is that what she said?
Yeah.
She was very clear in her question. I think you should get her on the program. He didn't know what to say. I think it's the height of hypocrisy for CY Leung to say that it's a great way for students to broaden their outlook and go and have an exchange program going to mainland cities, once in primary education, once in secondary, when he sent his kids to the UK. And he went to the UK himself. So if it's good enough for him, why isn't it good enough for everybody else?
Actually, other local parents also make such a comment, saying that why would you send your kids to UK, but you send our kids to China, and that's kind of unfair to them. They say he's actually saying something like just the clip that we play, and he said, "Oh, you are you saying that you don't want your kids to know about other cities?" I think it's a very inaccurate argument for him to say it on the radio show to criticize the parent, because apparently the parent wants her kids to know about the world. It's not just about China.
Absolutely.
So the thing is that if you want the kids to have a more global perspective, please don't just focus in China.
Exactly. Why not send them to Taiwan?
Yeah, also part of the China.
Also part of China, according to China. Why not send them to Taiwan?
Yeah.
What about Japan? Korea? Well, these are all highly industrialized countries with very intelligent workforces where people could learn a lot. They could learn another language.
Exactly. If people are criticizing Hong Kong students not global enough, then if you're only sending them to China, it seems to me that they only have one very, very narrow eyesight, focusing one small part of the world, that China is everything. And I would also doubt their motive behind. Why would they send people to China?
I think they have to look at the consequences for China if they did this as well. Can you imagine that they set up an exchange program with a school in Shenzhen, for example? Okay, so every term or every year, or however frequent this is, you had a bunch load of Hong Kong kids cross the border, go to Shenzhen, do an exchange program with them for a week, and then they go back again, okay? So all these Hong Kong kids go over there, they all start talking to the Shenzhen kids, and they say, yeah, we've got Facebook, we've got YouTube, we can do this, we can surf the internet, we can do that, we use Line, we use whatever apps that we can do. And the kids in China are going, well, we can't.
But they don't want to, because they have Weibo, they have WeChat, they have HappyNet that's substituting Facebook.
But so how many millions of VPN networks are there in China?
Because I don't know.
I am always in favor of travel. I am always in favor of exchange programs. I think that whatever the exchange program, the general principle that it's good to travel, that travel broadens the mind, is a good principle, and it's a correct principle, and everybody benefits from that. But I think that focusing purely on exchange programs with mainland China on the basis of fomenting a one China concept and people loving the mainland and appreciating that they are Chinese, it's the wrong way to do it.
Would you say that like a scholarism, they criticize this policy actually is the revival of the national education? Would you say that? Is it really a revival of the national education to, to teach students to be patriotic to PLC?
I don't think you can teach anybody to be patriotic, because patriotism is something that you feel. I think if you're forcibly exposed to something or forced to do something, then that's wrong. So if there's a forced exchange program where it's compulsory to attend an exchange program where when you go to China once in your primary education, once in secondary for however long, then that's wrong. It should be a voluntary program. If you want to do that, fine. Patriotism is not something that you can inculcate into anybody. You can't teach somebody to love a country. You can only try it, and you can try and sell the country. You can try and say, look, this is a great place. What you might have heard about China is just not right. Look at how we got things here. The food's better, blah, 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 blah. And there are some aspects of mainland Chinese life that would be better than Hong Kong. It's got more space, right? So that kind of thing.
That's why they speak so loud.
That's why
they have to speak so loud because they got so much space that they have to shout.
But they are not going to achieve patriotism and love of China and the younger generation by sending them on a trip. It's not going to work. You can't force people to do that. They have to find ways. If they're looking at their soft power,
what sort of soft power they have?
Well, the people that love a country because they love the country,
agree.
because they feel it. I mean, I'm British. I love my country because I do. Because I think we've got, many very awful moments in our history, but many great things we did. And if somebody attacked my country, I would defend it. So that's nobody taught me that. I did that by growing up in the place and feeling it. And that's the way I am. And most people feel that way. We're a very patriotic country. People here do not feel that. Why don't they feel that?
Hong Kong is our country.
Oh, Hong Kong is your country. They would say Hong Kong is just a city. But you don't feel Chinese. And most people in opinion polls do not feel that they're part of China. So they have to take a very long-term view of this, and forcing them on exchange programs or trying to re-educate them, or whatever the word is. What's the...
Brainwash
is not going to work. So to answer your question, do I think the exchange programs are a revival of national education? No, I don't. But I think that any kind of forced enlightenment like that is going to fail.
I think if they really have to, implement this exchange program, I think the first thing they have to do is that they should issue visa or the permits to go to China for students, because a lot of students got banned after the Umbrella Revolution.
Absolutely. So what are they going to do? Are they going to on these exchange programs? Is anybody who's ever boycotted a class automatically forfeits the right to go to mainland? How are they going to manage that? And also, is it going to be a two-way thing? Is it just Hong Kong students going to mainland, or are mainland students going to come to Hong Kong?
Don't think they will come.
I would happily host a kind of a joint TV recorded video conferencing session between a classroom in Hong Kong and a classroom in mainland. I would love to do that.
Oh, and with Taiwan too.
With Taiwan too. I would love to do that. I think that would be very, very interesting to have kind of like a Jerry Springer show, but without all the gossip and horrible stuff. But you know what I mean? That type of roving microphone type program where you've got a class in Hong Kong, a class in China, maybe a class in Taiwan as well, and the kids could compare their lifestyles. That could be done without actually having to go there.
Right.
But the chances of that happening are very limited, because the topics that you could cover would be censored by the PRC.
True.
So how many conversation topics would be allowed by the PRC government in that kind of open interchange? Very few.
It's also quite interesting to note that on the internet there is one graphic circulated quite widely these days. Is about a kindergarten teacher correcting the sentence making of a student. Actually, there is a homework that you have to write. I am a Chinese. I am a Chinese. I am a Chinese for like CNN time, and then they ask you to make one sentence like this sentence structure, and that student wrote I am a Hong Konger, and then the remarks of the teacher was quite funny, saying that there's no Hong Konger in the world. He didn't say in the world, but it's just basically it meant that there's no such thing called Hong Konger.
Has this teacher read the Oxford English Dictionary?
Probably no.
Has she read South China Morning Post? Because Hong Konger is a term that's accepted by the South China Morning Post and is in there every day. It's a collective noun.
Yeah, I mean...
it's not, no, I'm sorry, it's an adjective describing where somebody comes from. So you are a Hongkong, you're a Hong Konger by definition.
It's quite... becomes very sensitive here to call yourself Hong Konger now. And I mean, if I'm from Shanghai, then of course I would call myself Shanghainese, or I'm from New York, then I'm a New Yorker. And no one would take issue of that in America or even in China. But now Hong Kong people calling themselves Hong Konger, and then the people certainly got so sensitive, saying that, oh, you are trying to get to make yourself independent, and because you have your own identity now. It's not like that. It's just that we were born here, so we are HongKonger. We're just born here. It's nothing special.
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
What does worry me is the revision of the Chinese culture.
The Chinese history and culture.
Chinese history and culture. I think they're more focused on culture than history as a way of educating kids more about the mainland and about the country.
But
that's interesting how that's going to work.
But when you talk about Chinese culture, it will be I thought it would be about the old Chinese writing, the poem, or the painting stuff in the ancient time. It's not just about the after the short history of the Communist Party, right? It should be more, in depth, like the philosophy of other Chinese thinkers or something like that. But why would you say that it worried about you? Why?
Because they'll leave out the bits they want to leave out. You can't talk about culture. The pervasive culture in mainland China is a Communist Party-led ideology that affects culture. You can't talk about modern China, the role of modern China in the world, without looking at the role of the Communist Party. It's impossible.
It's true for the modern part of China. Then when you look at the modern part of China, then this very short history of PRC is that they have the Cultural Revolution. They have a lot of people got killed, and they got hungers. They got
famine.
Famine, and it's quite a lot of bad things happen. I think you say that you think that they would not mention that. Is it possible not mentioning that?
Well, they tried.
How? I mean, that would have a whole gap of at least some decades blank in the history.
I think if they're going to review these curricula, then it has to be done by people who are independent. If it's done by people who are independent and they can take a completely independent educationalist view about Chinese culture and Chinese history, then fine, I'm happy with that. But they can't, because if it's going to be political-led and it's going to be blocked or overseen or reviewed by any politician, then that smells bad from the start, so it's a waste of time. I wouldn't let my kids read it. I don't have kids, but if I had kids, I wouldn't let my kids do that.
Actually, I think 10 years ago, it was the pro-establishment people or the education bureau saying that we should not teach Chinese history, and they make it not mandatory. Before, it was mandatory to study Chinese history, and they changed it and they substitute it with liberal studies. They hope that the liberal studies would change the mind of Hong Kong people. And contrarily, the liberal studies, and Patricia Leung, the legislator, she said the liberal studies caused the umbrella revolution. The liberal studies make the students go on street to fight for democracy, and it's actually not a good thing. And what do you think about liberal studies in Hong Kong?
Well, I think liberal studies is conceptually a great idea. The purpose of liberal studies, the aims of the curriculum are very clear. They are to teach people how to think. It's the issue inquiry approach. Okay, so the whole purpose of liberal studies is there's an issue, go and find out about it. So it's how do you find out about it? How do you collate information? How do you discuss? How do you formulate ideas? So it's teaching kids how to think. It's not teaching them what to think, it's teaching them how to think. So the whole concept and the aims of liberal studies are ideal, and they're copied in most education systems around the world. They're called humanities or something in IB, in International Baccalaureate, things like that. So the comment that Priscilla Leung saying that liberal studies has made all these students into anti-government activists is just ridiculous. If it's given them a brain and it's given them a way of being able to think through an issue and to be able to take a stance and justify that stance because they've done the research and they understand the issue and they can explain it, then that's because they've educated their brain how to think properly.
Okay, so we kill the liberal studies. We have to.
Well,
right?
she wants to do that. No, I don't. Look. Intelligent people who've got the freedom of access to information are going to arrive at a conclusion. The vast majority of intelligent people of school and university age have come to a conclusion that they don't like the Chinese Communist Party, they don't support the current government. So that's not because they've been indoctrinated in any way, it's because they can think clearly. So if the purpose of liberal studies is to enable people to think clearly, then kids are always going to think that way. Because they have the right and the ability and they are trained to think. So they're not trained what to think. So if Priscilla Leung wants to move it to a situation where they're not taught how to think, they're taught what to think, then that is definitely a reinstatement of national education policy in a much more pernicious and vicious way.
I agree. So it's the education thing is in Hong Kong is changing quite quite a lot in the past few years, and they're always changing it. It seems that there will be more changes in the coming year because of the umbrella revolution. I would think more control. And actually, the PRC official made a statement last week saying that the Education Bureau should be more under control.
Under control by whom? By the
You know
government.
who. You know who.
There is no. I don't believe that there's any system in the democratic world where the curriculum is set in terms of detail by government and politicians. They might set the overall framework, which I think is the role of government to do that, but the content is not set by government. It's set by educationalists and specialists in the area.
Unless the politician or the government want to have some agenda behind
Well,
that.
they're entitled to their opinion.
Yeah,
They're entitled to be
outside.
but they're not entitled to inculcate their views. No.
True. So moving on to the next big thing about the policy is that the what?
Housing.
It's always a problem in Hong Kong. I think
Well, we have an estate agent who's the CE, so wouldn't he? He is an estate
he's a
agent.
surveyor.
Oh, whatever. He's
Yeah.
an estate
I
agent.
think
So our CE, who's an estate agent, probably should know a thing or two about housing, but does he?
Probably, at least he knows how to build some illegal structure without being caught.
Oh, that's true. Yes,
Yeah.
he knew how to cover up on a legal structure. Good for him.
I think some years ago I went to Singapore and then I saw these new flats selling in Singapore, and then they have this interesting slogan in simplified Chinese, say that this is a Hong Kong style apartment, and I thought, oh,
What does that mean? Small.
yes. I was thinking, oh, we have something
Small with
famous.
lots of bedrooms.
Yeah, and then okay, it means small and not suitable for actually human being. Then it would be Hong Kong style. So what happened how would the government address this issue, this famous issue of Hong Kong?
No, they've got to build more housing. That's everybody accepts that. The question is where
Right.
do they get the land from? Okay, so there's an issue now whether they get the land from country parks, which the environmentalists don't want, or whether they get it from golf courses, which rich people don't want because they can't play golf, or whether they do something about brown sites, or I don't understand why they just can't buy some land from PRC. That's what Macau did to build a university. Why can't they just get some land from the PRC?
Because the land is a very important issue for the integrity of one country. You can't buy the land.
But they did in Macau. They did in Macau. And why? This also, we're down to the landfill issue as well. We have a raging debate about landfill and incinerators, but if we're one country, why can't we just send the rubbish over the border to a landfill dump in Shenzhen? Just send it up the Pearl River.
We actually, I think 1 year ago, the government official, I don't remember whether it's Carrie Lam or someone, they actually apologized to the citizens in Shenzhen because we have these landfilling things going on in the near the border.
In Tunmun.
In Tunmun, yeah.
Tunmun landfill, right?
And then it causing some bad smell to them, and then we have to apologize to
So
them.
if we're one country, then we get the water from China.
We
okay?
buy, we don't get it for free.
We buy the water from China, and there's a heavy tax on that water. So the basic law principle of China not taxing Hong Kong is being violated because we overpay for our water. We breathe the air, which is sent over the border by China. So what is
Polluted air, you mean?
polluted air? So what's the problem with sending our rubbish to China? I don't get it. Why do we have to get the disadvantages of one country and none of the advantages? It's a very simple solution to the landfill problem: is send it up Pearl River and dump it somewhere.
I'm not an expert on that, but it's very interesting to note that even one of the biggest property developer in Hong Kong, Swire, they are actually against using the country park to develop for residential buildings. Though I think Swire got the point because country park is one of the biggest attractions for Hong Kong, and I mean, in the downtown probably is quite packed, quite crowded. But during the weekend, we can go to the country park and then do some exercise, and it's quite relaxing to go there. If you like hiking, Hong Kong is always the best place to go hiking. A lot of Japanese, a lot of tourists come to Hong Kong just for hiking, and there must be some way, like a lot of industrial area in Hong Kong is not very fully utilized. And we visited some of our friends who's actually having an apartment in the industrial area a month ago. I think it's quite a good idea to turn it to be in the residential area. Quite nice.
So why hasn't Swire told the estate agent about this? The estate agent being CY Lung. Has Swire told the estate agent about this?
Foreign intervention. Well, because they don't speak Mandarin.
Well, there's only so much you can do. You can either build on country parks, you can build on brownfield sites, you can change density policy, you can buy land from mainland China, you can reclaim land, or you can stop so many people moving here. Which of those solutions is going to be the one that we see?
Right.
How about the Fanling Golf Course? We can't talk about housing shortage without talking about Fanling Golf Course. We cannot do that.
Very important to play golf.
I think northeastern New Territories development, okay. But what about the Fanling? That's not far away from the northeastern New Territories. So can they give up the 9th hole maybe and sacrifice a little bit of then maybe on the agenda? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right, what was the other thing? The other thing we were going to talk about was the beginning of the legal year.
Yes. So,
and also, and that is an important thing because uphold the rule of law was one of CY Lung's 3 straplines on his.
It seems that they very funny to note that the rule of law, the meaning of rule of law interpreted by CY Lung is quite different from the ex-chairman of the Bar Association, Shek Wing Tai. It seems that what he meant was only people have to follow the laws, they have to obey the law. But Shek Wing Tai, in his speech of the annual year of the
opening of the legal year, why do they have? You're a barrister. Why do they have the opening of? Why do they have this process?
I never attended.
Okay. Don't ask him. Okay.
Yeah, it's talking about the rule of law. They had 3 speakers this year, and one is Rimsky Yun, and the DOJ, and then Jeffrey Ma, and the Chief Justice, and then the Shek Wing Tai. They have quite different opinion. It's quite interesting to note as well. And what Rimsky Yun saying that is that. He would say that the rule of law actually means that people have to obey the law. You have to follow the law, and he actually saying that if you trying to say that rule of law is more than that is a philosophical question. And Hong Kong legal scholar and actually saying that rebutted that, saying that is not true. It's not just a philosophical problem, a question. Is actually what rule of law means. It's not only about obeying the law.
Correct. The rule of law is an invisible umbrella under which everybody sits. It's a confidence mechanism. It's an institution of confidence.
And the Shek Wing Tai also said that in his speech that quite a lot of dictatorship or dictators, they try to emphasize on the obeying of law, to enforce their power. And I think that he's pointing at someone when he said that.
Yes, he's pointing at people that don't understand rule of law, that they mean rule by laws, which is what's done across the border.
And then when you have rule by law, then sometimes it's very likely to develop to be rule by man.
And rule by arbitrary decisions rather than by law.
Exactly.
So the law means what I want it to mean. So rule by law is an arbitrary decision of the person who made the law. It's not a framework under which everybody is protected and can feel confident.
True.
I think upholding the rule of law in Hong Kong is an essential thing. It's one of the things that makes this place survive. If we didn't have the rule of law here, then it would collapse. That's the one thing that we absolutely have to protect at all costs. So when we're talking about rule of law, obeying the law is one part of the rule of law. The rule of law is a concept. It's an umbrella of confidence. Obeying the law. If everybody disobeyed the law, then the law is an ass and there is no rule of law. Okay? But obeying the law in itself is not a sufficient condition for having rule of law.
I agree.
Okay?
And but the one thing that of course, people supporting the umbrella revolution or they support the pandemic, then they will quote quite a lot from the Shek Wing Tai. But they actually ignore one part, that Shek Wing Tai in his speech saying that people who disobey the court order in Mong Court and saying that they don't have to follow the court order in the injunction order, then actually they cause some damage to the rule of law if they don't obey the law. And I think there's one part that the protesters should should pay attention to when they break the law. They have to bear the consequences. They have to follow the procedures of law and to go through the trial and take up the responsibility, but not you trying to get away from it. Of course, they still have the right to defend themselves, I would say, because if that is a charge that they cannot or they don't agree, of course they can plead not guilty, and then they can go through a fair trial to let the judge to decide on that. If the judge make a verdict, they still have the right to appeal. If at the end, if they still got convicted, they really have to respect the judgment or decision of the court. And I think that's actually what the umbrella revolution did to the rule of law, was actually upholding the rule of law rather than causing any damage to it.
I agree. They affirmed the institution of the rule of law in a very clever way. They said, okay, I am disobeying the law. I know I'm disobeying the law, but I respect the rule of law, that I know that the consequences of my disobeying the law are that I'll get arrested. And I submit to due process of the rule of law. I submit to due process, and I'm happy to do that. I accept the consequences. I know I'm breaking the law. I accept the consequences, and I submit myself to the institution. So therefore, yes, the institution was upheld. And I think there needs to be a clear differentiation between obeying or disobeying the law and disobeying court orders. I think you and I we were talking before the program about disobeying court orders, that is a serious offence.
Right.
If you trust the institution of the rule of law to produce court orders, then those court orders are impartial judgments. They're not political. The government might have supposedly, if you support the rule of law. Okay, so you have to support the fact that the court order is issued in an impartial way. Okay, now if the government hid behind the use of court orders, that's a different thing.
Right.
So Geoffrey Ma did talk about that as well. He did say that whether a politician had used a court order or not was beside the point, that the court order itself was what was important. So very interesting. I think when Geoffrey Ma was making his speech, I was looking at some of the government ministers in the front row. They were squirming a little bit. They were squirming. But Rumsky, I look at some of these government ministers and I think, when is one of them going to resign? When is one of them going to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I can't do this anymore? How many times do you look at Carrie Lam and you think, she's squirming inside? She's squirming because she doesn't believe what she's saying. How many of these government...
She doesn't believe in what she's saying?
I'm sure she doesn't believe in a lot of what she says. But somebody like Rimsky-Yoon, when he's forced to say some of the rubbish that he has to say, I'm sure that inside he's squirming. He's an intelligent guy. He's a barrister. Carrie Lam is an intelligent woman.
I think
they're squirming.
I think the way that how you can, speak so confidently and to the public and is that to brainwash yourself to believe that it is really the good thing for the people. They really truly believe that they are doing the best. That's why they could
Do you believe them if they said that? If you said if Carrie Lam said, look, I don't like the proposal, but I'm doing it because I think it's the best we can get, and I really believe that, would you believe her?
I don't know.
Why doesn't she say that?
See, she's like she made the comment about the policy address, that there was a forward in the policy address, and she came out and said, "Is the opinion of the CE is not the." It doesn't represent.
We're talking about undergrad. They were talking about undergrad magazine, weren't they? Yeah. That's his opinion, not mine.
Yeah.
And was it Rimsky-Yoon said the same thing? Somebody else said the same thing.
Yeah.
I just look at all of these government ministers, and I think one of you must be squirming inside so much that you can't bear to do this anymore, and that one of you is going to have to say, look, I don't agree with this, but it's the best that we can do. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to resign because I can't stand this from a moral point of view? Or do you want me to continue doing it because it's the best that I can do, and as a public servant, that's my duty? I want one of them to say that.
Talking about the government official, and of course another official, Chan Tak-sing, and he's make a statement in the newspaper saying that he actually think that there's more freedom of speech that Hong Kong people can enjoy nowadays than during the colonial time, because he was arrested during the colonial time in the 60s when he was a student.
This is alleged president you're talking about?
No, the brother.
Oh, the brother of him.
Yeah, the brother of him, and he said that he was arrested because he was supporting the communists at that time. That's why he was arrested and he was put in jail. And then he said actually he now enjoy more freedom of speech because he can openly support the Communist Party. And what he said is that I think it's quite don't you have no shame? Because at that time, the leftists, the communists, they set bomb, they caused a riot in Hong Kong, and of course you have to go to jail. And then now saying that using the defense, it's not using the defense of freedom of speech, it's actually using it as to attack people at that time. And when you talk about freedom of speech of some human rights, you actually try to to defend yourself, but not to using this as a weapon to attack other people. I mean, this week I would say that I will give him this Shame on You award.
Shame on you.
Welcome, Chanta Singh. You receive our Shame on You award. And coming to the end of our show, and thank you, Lee, for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm always happy to be on your show.
And if you guys still want to have, apart from the video, and you can also listen to our podcast, and you can share, you can search it from the where I don't
know. You need Harminder here to read. He knows his off by heart. You need this. ION Hong Kong Podbean. Yes. That one I remember. It's a Facebook page. It's a YouTube. ION Hong Kong. Harminder, where are you?
Yeah, where are you, Harminder? I don't remember that. But anyway, you can actually find it from Facebook and search ION Hong Kong, and you will find the video link and the audio link. And in Apple, you can also search it from the iTunes podcast and ION Hong Kong, and you will find us. And thank you.
Thank you.